Finding life a bit complex? Confusing? Aware that your old strategies aren't working? Why not ask Pam and Marilyn? This is the Irreverent Therapists, and we're here to add some clarity, humor, and a bit of what might be considered blasphemy to your day.
And welcome everybody to the Irreverent Therapists. I'm Pam Hodling, and with me is, of course, my co-Irreverent therapist, Marilyn Bradford.
Hello!
So today our topic is, you think you are secure. Guess again. So I love this one. I am so glad we're doing this. Most of us think security comes from owning our own house, having a family, landing a good job, or having money in the bank. But all of that can vanish in a split second. Join us for a discussion of security, what it really is, and how you can create it. So, Marilyn, the reason I like loving this topic is I spent most of the first 30 years of my life trying to ensure my security, and it didn't work.
At all. I mean, really.
So, what prompted you with this topic? Because I think you're the one who came up with it.
What did prompt me with that topic? Well, just I've been looking at what security is and what isn't, and working a lot. You know, we've been doing the money book together, looking a lot at how I'd made money my security. And, if I just have enough money in the bank, I'll be secure. And I just realized how insane that was. You know, the rich person who stumbles over the soda can and cracks their head and dies, or they lose all their money, and it was like, wait a minute, I thought money was supposed to be security.
Yeah.
And I remembered when, I married my first husband like I was supposed to do. And it was like, well, being married is security. No, well, we ended up in divorce. So it really got me looking at how often we're searching for things outside of ourselves as if that's going to create security for us. And none of those things really do.
No, they don't. I mean, I know someone who, belongs to a religion where you get married and you never stop being married. Like you don't get divorced. And, and she and her husband were married, and they, she was, for her, this was for life. And, it was her security and stuff like that. And, a few years ago, suddenly he left. And she was like, wait a second, you're not supposed to leave. This isn't supposed to be forever. Right. And I'm making light of it. It was very traumatic for her, but it's, she had the point of view that she was secure because she was married, and, this was going to be forever, and her husband had a good job, and, and then it all did go crumbling down, and she had to find how to create her life herself, which I think is part of it. I mean, we think of security as, when I have the good job, when I get the raise, when, I think a lot of people do what you were talking about of make it about money, but it can even be things like, if I have enough locks on my doors, then I'm secure. Or,
I don't know why I'm laughing about that. I think it's the insanity of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it just all, whether it's an earthquake that makes your house come tumbling down, or a financial market crash that takes away all your savings in the bank, or, what you thought someone was in your life and then they're not. To me, all of that comes from, it's a couple of things. One is it's projecting onto something outside of you that this is what's required for me to be okay. And it's also, it's, how do I say this? If you're creating your life yourself, you don't need anything outside of you to be secure.
Okay, we're going to have to say more about that. And I'm thinking, before we do, let's define what most people mean by security.
Actually, can I say one thing before that? Because you did.
No, I'm sorry, you can't.
Well, because otherwise I'm going to forget. But you mentioned the money book, so I just want to tell people what that is. Yeah. And it's a book called How to Become Money Workbook. And you can get it through the accessconsciousness.com website. They have a shop. And you just look for How to Become Money Workbook. And it's basically, it's a book that allows you to work through and clear your points of view about money and what it is and what it isn't. So highly recommend it.
Yes, because it gives a very different perspective about money, which I have found extremely useful.
And it is wild and wacky, so if you're looking for something very normal and straightforward, get it.
When did we ever recommend anything normal and straightforward? I'm just curious.
Yes, we never have. Never.
And probably never will. So what does security, or different question, what did security mean to you, Pam, when you were looking for it? What was it that you hoped to get? Because I think we can do a lot with that.
It was, what I hoped was to get things in such a way that I knew everything would be okay and I would be okay. Did I ever tell you I used to think I'd be a bag lady?
No!
When I was growing up, I was sure that one day I would be a bag lady because, I had all this anxiety and depression and I was really, relying on my parents and I figured they'd die and I'd be a bag lady.
Well, as long as all the bags were for Neiman's and Nordstrom's, you'd be okay. But,
yeah. But, but basically, so for me, security was, it was that nothing is going to come my way that derails my being okay.
Right.
And I was never okay. I never felt okay. So I never had security in the first place. It was just this pipe dream, that someday everything in my life would be such a way that I'd be okay.
Right. And I think most of us define okay as I have enough money, I have a house, I have friends, I have a church, I have a this, I have a that, I have a whatever.
Well, and for me, it was also feeling safe. Like I can remember, so the house I grew up in this big house, and after my mom died, and my dad met the lady who was going to eventually be my stepmother, and they were living together, and basically I was in graduate school living in this big house all by myself, and one night I heard this noise down below my window. And you know how you hear all these noises and they're nothing? This is something. This is definitely something at the window down, the floor below my room. Mm-hmm. And I called the police and they were coming and they said, don't get off the phone. And I'm like, it's my worst nightmare. I'm at home alone by myself and someone's breaking in. And it just kept going on longer and longer. And I was like, there is no way this is a burglar because they've been making all this noise for this huge amount of time. And so I looked out the window so that when the police arrived, I'd see what was down there. And something ran away and I could tell it was some sort of animal. So it ends up, there was a mouse that had gone up a drain spout and a fox was trying to get this mouse out and batting this pipe, and it was making all this noise, but basically that, where I functioned from at that point, then I was all about how do I make this house secure enough that all feel safe? And we got a burglar alarm and we did all this stuff. And you know what? It wasn't until I did the work to feel secure in myself that I ever actually felt safe anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up another thing, which is fear. I remember an incident, and I was married to my second husband at that point, but we had this 2-story condo, and the bedrooms were upstairs. And I had gone to bed early, and I can't remember if my husband had gone out to listen to music or he was downstairs. I think he'd gone out anyway, I thought he was downstairs. And I heard all this noise on the porch. And I immediately went to fear and panic. So a lot of, like you with a mouse, it's like something's going to be bigger and greater than us and come and get us or something.
Yep.
And so I was like, I can't stay up here. I started sneaking down the stairs, and it was my husband talking to a friend out on the front porch. But I was so aware that my first response was to go to fear. And I think that's, we know fear is, maybe we should say more about fear being a distractor implant, because as soon as you're in fear, you're out of awareness and you can't actually know what's going on. So Access has a whole series of distractor implants some of which are anger, rage, fury, hate, blame, shame, regret, guilt, addictive, compulsive, perverted points of view, love, sex, jealousy, peace, life, living, death, reality, business, fear, doubt, and relationship.
You got them all. Said, here's a few.
I got them all.
Did all of them.
How about that? I answered yes on the quiz we took. So anyway, the whole point is these are not innate to you. They're essentially put into you in order to control you.
Yeah. And I mean, they distract you from what is. So it's like if you're going to fear, that you're distracting yourself from, and you know, one of the things we talk about is, you know, would an infinite being truly be afraid? And it's like, no, an infinite being wouldn't be afraid. So, you know, when you go to fear, it's something that you're doing to distract you from what's really going on. And I can tell, I mean, we could do a whole show on that, Marilyn. I think we might have just lost a bunch of people, like, you know, oh, my fear is real. But the thing to take from this is there are ways of working with fear that actually take care of it and get rid of it quite quickly if you're willing to know it's a distractor.
Well, and what I would say is if you actually think about it, fear is always about something in the future. I mean, if you're in the middle of what's going to be maybe a car accident, are you actually afraid, or are you 100% present doing whatever you can do? You know, if you're falling down, are you afraid, or are you, okay, how do I land? You know, it's always when we're actually in the middle of something, in general, we're calm.
Yeah.
So,
but it's the projecting into the future and what might happen and what do I do if this and what do I do if that?
Yes, exactly. And fear comes out of that need or decision that we require security from the outside.
We're going on a break. We'll be back.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
What if living didn't have to be so serious?
What if you could move beyond your problems with greater confidence and ease than you've ever imagined?
Throw your labels out the window and join the Irreverent Therapists for practical tips and a very different way of approaching the changes you would like to create.
Marilyn Bradford
and Pam Hodling
have empowered hundreds of people to come out of self-judgment, quit looking to experts, and begin to create the lives they desire.
Join us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Irreverent Therapist Show.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
welcome back to the Irreverent Therapists, where we're talking about you think you are secure? Guess again. And I got so excited by our conversation, I totally ignored my job of watching the clock for when we go to break. So we were right in the middle of talking about fear. So, Marilyn, do you remember what wonderful thing you were saying?
I have no idea what I was saying, because we talked about it, a distractor implant, and also that when you're actually in the middle of something, fear is always about the present, or it can be about about the future, or it can be about the past, repeating itself in the future, but it's never actually, you cannot be in fear and be present. Mm-hmm. I mean, recently, I think I mentioned this on the last show, my encounter with the badger on the top of the mountain, but he was kind of a nasty guy. He could have given me a nasty bite for sure if he'd come to attack me. And then I probably would have had to have rabies shots and blah, blah, blah. But I was very aware at the moment of just taking action. Mm-hmm. Of being present in the moment. And I'm like, and I started to throw rocks, not at him, but around him and yelling and like, get out of here and all of this. And we do take action unless we have what do I want to say? Almost zombified ourselves with our, mm-hmm. with our patheticness. Most of us actually take action in situations to remedy them. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, during the break, what I was thinking about is, when we talk about secure, you think you're secure. I mean, to me, there's the secure, because what we've already been talking about of fear. Like if I'm afraid someone's going to break in the house, or I'm afraid to walk down the street, or, it's like a fear, secure about having safety. Mm-hmm. Of yourself and, security, that kind of security. But then there's also the secure of, to me, the secure of I've got a good job, I've got a house. It's like I've got things handled. Nothing's going to come my way that I don't have enough money for, or I don't have enough, everything handled enough that I can do it.
I've got it all plotted out.
Yes. Down to the little nanosecond, I know exactly what I need, and I have it all taken care of. Oh my gosh, what a boring existence.
A cage. You basically put yourself in a cage, because if you're really looking for that outside security, you can't actually create a really interesting life, because you can't take any what you would consider risks. Yeah. And I'm not talking about quitting your job and moving to the mountains or anything like that. I'm just talking about, well, what else would I like to add? And I'm going to be a writer. That feels a little risky. So security is also sense of self in this reality's terms. Like, I feel good about myself, but if I join this writing group, I might find that I'm a bad writer. And then what would I do about that? It's about having everything the same and stay the same.
Yeah. Well, and what I think about is in our description, we were like, okay, we think of security as owning a house, having a good job, money in the bank, family, relationships, whatever. And it can all go away in a split second, because it's like, say you're in an earthquake and your whole house disappears, all your family. I mean, everything truly can disappear in a moment. Yeah. So, so given that, then what is security if none of what we think of as being secure or security truly is? I mean, actually, I guess the question I would ask is there actually any security, or are we all doing a pipe dream, or is it that we need to redefine what security is?
I think it's the latter. And I'm reminded of that story of the fellow who, there was some big hurricane down in Florida, and they interviewed him. He's standing on his slab, and he said, well, I moved down here from the Midwest, and I had, my whole life, brought all my wedding pictures and all my earthly possessions, and now all I have is a slab, but I've got me.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the essence of redefining security. It's that sense that you are enough, and whatever comes your way, you're going to be able to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what it makes me think of is, so Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, and Marilyn and I are both Access Consciousness facilitators. He talks about, he's been like totally broke, bankrupt, like totally starting over from scratch 4 times. And for him, he doesn't go to, oh no, I've lost everything. It's like, oh cool, now I can totally create whatever I choose. And, so I think we have this idea of, if I've got this, I've got it. If I've got security, if I've got this stuff, I've got it made. And I think part of the fear of not having that security is a sense of maybe I lucked into it. Maybe I was born, maybe my parents had money and I inherited it. Or, maybe I got this job and I really never thought I could, but it worked out. And rather than seeing all of that as what we're creating and we can create again, it's like if you're looking at all of that as it just happened to you, you happened to be in this great situation, you happened to get everything in place to feel secure, then if it goes away, like you're really lost.
Yes. But that's a really good point, Pam, because we're not told that we actually create everything in our lives. If you created inheriting a bunch of money, good for you. It wasn't luck.
Yeah.
You got yourself born into the right family, and I think another thing is one of the things that prevents so many people from having security is the legacies of the belief systems of their childhoods.
Yeah.
I know my parents came from the Depression, which was very difficult in America. They were fortunate. They had a house, chickens, a vegetable garden. My grandfather worked at I think he delivered milk during the Depression. But anyway, he had a sort of a job. But that led them to this sense of a lack of security and tightness and holding on to everything, which is not actually a great place to create from. I think another sense of, I'm going 8,000 different directions. I want to talk about awareness, but I also want to talk about there's a great, if you act, I'm going to use both words. How does it get any better than that? If you have a sense of awareness of the abundance of the universe, that in and of itself creates a kind of a space of security. I think when my parents were groping for security, there was the sense of the pie. And if they ate the last piece, that was it. There was no more pie anywhere.
Yeah.
Which is different from, okay, that pie's gone, now what?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there's something else here.
Yeah. Well, and I think, when you were talking about that, the Depression, and because my mother-in-law was a kid in the Depression and, grandparents were kids in the Depression. Or, not kids, adults, whatever.
Right.
But, there's definitely been people in my life who were shaped by that. Yes. And that energy of holding on, it's like, I think so much for people, security is about whatever I've got to hold on to it, because if I lose it, then I don't have it. And again, it comes back to that. If you can create, then there's no issue. Like, what I think of is when we took our kids to the orthodontist and they both needed braces at the same time. And the orthodontist is like, okay, it'll be $10,000 for the both of them. And, what I was aware of is a few years ago, I would have gone to, oh no, there goes my security.
Right.
How are we going to pay for this? And I was like, oh, I can totally create $10,000 more dollars. There was no question in my universe that I couldn't do it. And that comes from knowing that I'm creating everything about my life the way it is right now, and I can just choose to add more and create more.
Yeah, absolutely. But you brought up a topic that I would like you to address, Pam, because even from my own mother, but I know that for so many parents, one of the greatest sources of insecurity, fear, worry, doubt, all those things are their kids.
Yeah.
What's going on with kids. And since I'm not a mom and you are,
I get to talk about it.
You get to talk about it.
Well, actually, you know what I'm going to suggest is that we hold off on the kid talk until we come back from break, because there's just a couple of minutes. Okay. And I'll instead go ahead and say a little bit more about the holding on thing. But I'm writing down kids so we don't forget. Because I think
you could always type it in our message area.
Yes. But, but what I was just realizing is that whole thing of where we hold on to try to keep security is actually exactly what keeps you from being secure. Like if you're in that space of holding on and trying to keep things the same and trying to not lose, you've already lost.
Interesting you should say that, because that brought up my car, which is a 2003 Subaru, which just basically sort of died last week. Now I'm having it looked at tomorrow. But one of the things I realized is I decided I'm going to have this car for another 5 years, because Subarus go 200,000 miles. So why shouldn't I? And now it's security. Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't security in the sense of, it was security in the sense of I have my car thing solved.
Yeah.
Like I have my marriage. Okay, I'm married. I've got that done and taken care of. It's like I've got my car thing set. I got a great car, and I really, in all the years I've had it, have not had any major difficulties with it. So this came as like a what? What? I may need a new car? I love that car. How could this happen? How could I create that? And it just made me laugh. It's so timely. And I am taking it into a different garage tomorrow, and we'll see what's going on. And I've been talking to it. We're weird here on the Irreverent Therapists.
Yeah.
But,
well, actually, that's very much like me, because I thought I had my car thing solved because I was going to just keep my car until I ran it into the ground, and I figured that would be a few years.
Right.
When it actually stopped working, what I created was my ex choosing to buy me a new car.
So did your car talk to my car? I mean, this is, what is this? Two Subarus quit working at the same time?
Buy you a car.
Maybe you're right. I like that idea. And we are about to go to break here.
So we will be back in just a few minutes to talk more about You Think You Are Secure. Yes, again. Marilyn and I are the Irreverent Therapists, and we will be back shortly.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on OMTimes Radio. I'll meet you there.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
If you remember living fearlessly, joyfully, and in a world filled with adventure, happiness, pleasure, and unbridled living, then this show is for you. Join me, Dame Nicole Brandon, as I bring you the world's top experts in wealth, creativity, flow, seat-edging technology, space, wellness, health, love, lust, and passion, all merging together each week here at the Hub of Happiness. Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Passionate Living. where you can ride on the magic carpet ride of living and learn how to lead a passionately wild, exciting, and outrageously amazing life.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back to the Irreverent Therapist, where we're talking about you think you are secure, guess again. And if you if you would like to ask us questions or give us comments, you can go to our Facebook page. It's on Facebook. Look for the Irreverent Therapists. And I said when we came back, I'd talk about kids, but I think first I just wanted to say because when we were joking, but when I said I created my ex giving me a car or buying me a car. That's actually true. And I wanted to, because I keep talking about creating. And so I just wanted to tell people what I mean by that. It's like, so when my car stopped working, if I'd gone to, oh no, my car's not working. What am I going to do? I can't afford a new car. I figured I'd have a few years to create, more money to have to buy a car when I need to replace this, blah, 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 blah. I probably would have been in a real mess. Instead, I was asking questions. What else is possible with this? What energy, space, and consciousness can I be that would allow me to create something totally different here? And, so then when my ex was like, wow, I think we need to get you a car, I wasn't coming from a space of, I don't want anything from you. I mean, not that we have that relationship anyway, but that would certainly block that from being created. And it's like, he suggested the idea, and then I was willing to look at, well, what can I contribute to this? What does he require from me in terms of, so we've changed around some of our financial agreements and stuff like that in ways that work for both of us, but it was me being willing to have it show up in any sort of way different than what I imagined that allowed me to create having a new car.
I'm on it.
Okay. So ask me again about kids, or if you have something else that you've thought of.
I think this would be a real contribution, because I know so many parents worry about their kids, whether it's their kids' security, like if they're, teenagers or even toddlers, if they're being kidnapped, or, just walking away in a mall, or later on their bikes getting hit, or, my mother was a great worrier. So, and there's really nothing to do with kids unless you lock them in their bedroom. And even then they could choke on a toy or something.
Right.
So I'd just be interested in what that was like for you and how you dealt with it and what else you've heard from other moms and that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, certainly when I was first started as a mom with young children, I was like, everything you're talking about, I was worried about. Everything from, do you try to get them to sleep through the night and let them cry it out, or is that damaging them for life? And you should be, let them sleep with you for 5 years. It's like, because there's so much advice on parenting and so much conflicting advice. So I would say, as initially as a parent, I was coming from the space of, I've got to find the right way to do this, or I'm going to scar my kids for life, which you'll notice there's no question in there.
Well, also that's what you're going to do, not what the big bad world is going to do. So that's also another way of feeling insecure.
Yeah. And it's, and then there was all this stuff of, yes, somebody might kidnap my kids. Well, Marilyn and I, we both live in New Mexico. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. It's a very different place here. And, my husband and I, when we first moved here, one of our, we had our first baby was 6 months old, and we were in Home Depot. And we were, people come over to you because you have a baby, and this couple came over and they were talking to us for about 20 minutes. And in my head, I'm like, are they scoping us out to kidnap the kids?
Oh, wow.
And lo and behold, no, it's just New Mexico. It's a very, warm, friendly place.
Yeah.
But, so then if you ask so how did I change out of that space? I think a big part of it is recognizing that my kids are amazing beings in tiny bodies. It's like, so much of the time we look at our kids as it's my job to raise this kid, and I can do it well or I can do it poorly, and, like I said, damage them for life. From the space of this is an infinite being who happens to be in a little body, but this being has choice, and this being knows what they're here for. There's
you're gonna have to like back up and say more. That's gonna be like weird for a lot of people.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Which part? There's so many things I just said.
Let's see. This is an infinite being with choice that knows what they're doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what we tend to do is think of kids as they're like this blank slate that it's my job to mold them into what I think they should be. Not that I really function from that place, but, that's where a lot of people parent from.
Oh, yeah. They need to be good, whatever it is, Italian Catholics or Muslims.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah. And, so for me, before I even had the access tools, it was more of like, who is this amazing being and how can I not be in their way, basically?
That's an interesting question for a parent. How can I not be in their way? Wow.
Yeah. And then, when I got the access tools, then it was even more. I was able to clear my points of view about what good parenting is or isn't, and really just be with them and be like, okay, so what's required right now? And it, and it still is like, here's a 5-year-old. You got to keep them out of the street so they don't get run over.
Right.
But you can take those steps from a space of, like Marilyn, if I was walking down the street with you and you started to step into the street, I would do whatever was required to keep you from being hit by a car. But I'm
so glad to hear that. I've wondered about that, Pam. So that's really good.
I really would. I would save you. I would totally save you, Marilyn. It's like, so often, okay, so with you, I would be treating you as another individual with like total respect and, hey, you're not seeing that you're about to get hit by the car. I'm going to help you out. Right. Mm. So often what we do with kids is it's like, we need them to show up in a certain way so that we look like good parents. We don't like it when they're misbehaving because then it's like everybody's looking at us thinking we're terrible. There's like all this crap loaded on top of it. And I still catch myself interacting with my kids in a way that I would never interact with an adult. And I go, wait a second, this is an amazing being here. From that space, I would handle this very differently. And it's like, you don't let them walk all over you or anything, but you're not, looking down at them and, because, we're talking about security. So much about trying to be secure is to control everything and make sure it turns out all right. You cannot take this amazing being who happens to be 2 years old or 5 years old or 15 years old or 30 years old and control them into being what's going to be safe and secure.
In your terms.
Yeah. You can, if instead you're willing to ask them, what do you know? How do you see this? What would you like to create? Or, hey, this here, what you're choosing, what is that creating? Is that really what you want to create? Is that how you want your friends to look at you? But it's their choice.
Well, and also what we were talking about earlier, that willingness to let go. Mm-hmm. If you're holding on too tightly, you can't, the tighter you hold on to, the more it decreases your sense of security. And one thing I'd like to get to in this last, whatever we have, 20 minutes-ish with a break is the difference between holding on tightly and this drive for security outside of ourselves. And as Gary says, Gary Douglas, the only real security in life is awareness.
Oh, yeah. Let's get to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you use awareness in your life. So, a lot of what I get to with awareness is asking questions. I mean, that's how I get to it. Okay, so I'm experiencing this, quote, fear. I might ask, who does that belong to? Or what's actually going on here, that I've been unwilling to be aware of? Do I need to turn around and not go down this street? What would create more? And it really does take practice, but as you begin to develop this whole series of questions, what you're really doing is finding that sense of security, which is to say, it's going to be more expansive than more contractive within yourself.
Yeah.
I think, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does. You know what it makes me think about? I don't know if you know this about me, but I went through a period of time where I was quite germophobic.
I did not.
Because I had this like horrendous like digestive thing going on. And, if I got sick and like got the flu or had the throat, like something like that, it would so disrupt everything that I could hardly eat for months after, it was this whole thing. And so I got very like, okay, if I'm around people who are sick or something, I was very germophobic. And what changed it for me was, because I was doing all these, alternative healing things and stuff, was this idea of if you actually balance, work on your health, your body is totally capable of withstanding all kinds of germs.
Right.
But it was that idea of rather than I have to avoid what's outside of me, I can contribute to and expand on what's inside of me. And it all went away. It was very situational. But
well, you bring up a great thing that I'd like to talk about when we come back from break. And I just had this awareness from what you were saying, Pam, which is that traditionally the way most people look at security is they see themselves constantly as a potential victim of something.
Yes. And
violence or loss. Yeah.
You're trying to, take care of everything so that you won't be that victim.
Right. Exactly. That this bad thing won't happen to you.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, and there's the whole thing of what if there is no bad things? We can talk about that too when we get back. So
all right.
You think you are secure? Guess again. We'll be back with your Irreverent Therapists in just a few moments.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Dr. Kevin here, and I want to invite you every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, to join me on the Dr. Kevin Show, where we have a diversity of guests who help you step outside the box, behind the curtain, and see what a load of crap is going on in the world today, so you have more information with which to make better decisions. We'll see you there. Namaste.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Simone Milicis would like you to know that business can be fun, which is why she wrote the book, Joy of Business. What if you could have the joy of business rather than the stress and struggle? Most of the time, the only thing stopping you from a thriving business is you. In the Joy of Business book, Simone gives you access consciousness tools and pragmatic ways to get out of your own way and to create the business, life, and living you know is possible and beyond what this reality says is achievable. Business is joy. It's creation. It's generative. It can be the adventure of living. You can purchase your copy of the book through Amazon or Joy of Business website, www.accessjoyofbusiness.com.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Irreverent Therapists, where we're talking about you think you are secure, guess again. So, Marilyn, right before the break, you dropped a little bomb of
I did.
the whole thing about potential victim and how it's that point of view that we're this potential victim that keeps us looking for security.
Absolutely, because it's all about I'm less than, I'm inadequate, and something bad is going to come and happen to me. Not, okay, you know what? Sometimes there is an earthquake. Sometimes the market does crash. Two things about that. One is, even if something like that does happen, the real security is knowing that you're going to be okay. You're going to create something. But two, if you're really willing to be aware, you will probably have taken your money out or not be in the particular epicenter of that earthquake.
Yeah.
And people think, oh, that's just silly. But that's actually what awareness can create. I mean, I remember it was when I was fairly new to Access, so maybe 8 years ago or something. I almost always saw clients. In fact, I would say always saw clients in my office on Wednesdays. And that particular Wednesday, a couple people canceled. And then I just decided, I'm not going to go in. I don't really want to go in. And I didn't know why, but I knew I wasn't going in. So I canceled the other clients. Well, that day there were two offices in their waiting room, and my suite mate had a client that basically came in, threatened suicide, pulled a gun. She got out eventually. The SWAT team was there. There was like a 6-hour standoff. Eventually, and then he actually did kill himself, and then the SWAT team stormed our office, broke the doors down.
Wow.
And if I'd been there, I probably would have been a hostage of some sort, or it certainly would not have been great.
Well, you would have been there. You would have been in the midst of it. You could have gotten badly hurt or killed. Yeah.
It was like, no, I'm just not going in today. That just doesn't read.
Yeah. Well, and what that makes me think of is so often we have the awareness and then we logic ourselves out of it.
Yes. Why would I not do that?
And then, okay, so this is a non-security kind of example of this, but, but basically I have an office, and it's not, like the office next door, if they're in there and they're talking really loudly and stuff like that, you can hear it. Well, and I work with them about it, and we're trying different things. But, basically yesterday I had a session and something had changed. They'd rearranged their office and it was so loud. I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm going to go get a new office. So I looked around at other offices in that building. So I had the awareness of it's time to change something. And this other office, it's like, it's a little bit smaller, same price, has some good things. And I was trying to think about it logically of like, would it handle this, this, and this? So I called Marilyn and she asked me some questions. And when we looked at the energy of it, it's like, absolutely yes, time to change to a new office, but not that one that looks like it would probably be a good one by logic. It's like, look for something else, something totally different. And that, again, that doesn't involve security and stuff, but so often, we'll have the awareness like, oh, I just don't really feel like going into work today. And then you could have talked yourself into, well, these clients really need me, or I need the money, or, it's not responsible to cancel. Like, there's so many things you could have done to try to convince yourself to ignore your awareness.
Yeah, and you were saying that your example wasn't about security, but it actually is. It's like if you'd been in the normal mode of this reality, it's like, oh, here's a different office. I'll take that. Now that's all settled.
Right. I've handled it.
I've handled it.
I'm
exactly.
secure.
I'm now secure. I now have an office. And it's not that we don't get a sentence like, okay, yeah, it would be really nice to have this, done with. But it's that willingness to not come to conclusion and not make that sense of security override your awareness. I think that's how I would put it, actually.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up about not go to conclusion. It's like, so, we're talking about, okay, here's all these ways we think we're secure. You're really not secure, but, what actually is security and how can you create it? And, so I just want to highlight, it's all these things we're talking about. When you're willing to ask questions, be aware of things, not come to conclusion, it's like all of that is and trust yourself to know that whatever occurs, you can come up with something that's going to work for you.
Exactly. Yeah. It's that sort of inside job thing again.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
And it's also a willingness to change. I think that a lot of what people look for as security is they want to get their whole, and we've mentioned this, but they want to get their whole life basically settled. But the thrill of life really is having change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't have change, in a way, you're not living.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you flit around and this and that. That's really not what we're saying. But it is about that willingness to see in any situation, I wonder what else is possible. To keep in the question, I guess, is what it would be.
Yeah. And, the other thing I would add to that, I think I dropped this in just before the break, is not judging things as good or bad. What that makes me think of is, you'll probably remember this, but a few years ago, we were on vacation and my daughter had a seizure. And,
yes.
It's like, you were talking about parents, security and stuff. Watching your kid have a seizure next to a fire that she could have fallen into is not quite the secure thing. So it was very intense. Then we went to the hospital and she had all these tests. And when we came home, she had more tests. She was diagnosed with a kind of epilepsy and all this stuff. So, but I never judged it as bad. I never went to, oh my God, this is terrible. What does this mean for her life? Mm-hmm. This is, what did I do wrong? Like all that kind of stuff that we so often do as parents. I used these access tools. And when I did start to go into any of that, I called Marilyn and she used the access tools and helped clear me of it. So I was able to be totally present with my daughter without any freak out on my part, which helped her have a much easier time with the different kinds of things we had to do to accommodate all this. And, but it's like, so that's something that most people would say, oh my God, that's terrible. That's bad. That happened. That's bad. If you don't go to that bad, then it's just, okay, what's required in this moment? What can I do here? What can I contribute? So I'm bringing that up because to me, that's that space we're talking about where it's like, no matter what goes on, you can create whatever you need to create. If you lose all your money, you can create more money. If your family member has a terrible, has a health problem, you can create what you need to create to do this. In a way,
well, and I think
for you.
Yeah, I think it also modeled for her that it was possible, if she chose it, to go through these, quote, traumatic situations without freaking out.
Yeah.
That you don't have to make your life about trauma drama.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, she's kind of tossed that out the window as a 13-year-old.
Well, she's loving her trauma drama. I don't know too many 13-year-olds that don't love their trauma drama.
But for many years before she became a teenager, she didn't. She was like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. And she would just, because we had a lot of stuff go on in our family. One year that a lot of things changed and some people died and it was intense and she rolled with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So we have about another minute or two. What else? Is there any last words on security?
I think some of it is if you're looking for security, you're looking for something, in the traditional sense that life does not have to offer you.
Yeah.
so that you basically set yourself up for failure and constant worry, because life is about change. And once again, I would say the only real security is that willingness to be aware and the willingness to develop your sense of self to know that whatever comes up, you're going to handle it. You're going to manage one way or another. And it doesn't have to look a particular way.
Yeah.
Handling it, financial disaster could mean moving in with your parents or getting a friend or till you get back on your feet, or it could mean all kinds of things. But it's that willingness to give up the expectation and to ask a lot of questions and to be aware. I think that's the best that I can say about it.
Well, yeah. And, just kind of to expand on what you said, it's like when you're looking for security, you're looking outside yourself. You're basically making it security is something outside yourself, which basically by definition then you can't have.
Right.
It's I don't have it. It's outside of me.
Right.
When you're willing to look at, okay, so what am I aware of? What questions can I ask? What do I know here? And know that you can create. It's like, I don't know that I would call that security, Marilyn, but I would definitely call it being the source of and the creation of your life, which I think is the closest we can get to security.
Right, exactly.
Because it's like, then there's no problems. There's no, there's none of that stuff. So we are just about to stop. So I should tell you what we're doing next week, which is your history making you hysterical? So
I love it.
Join us next week, Pam and Marilyn, the Irreverent Therapists. Same time. If you have questions for us, go to our Facebook page and post them there, or you can contact us through our website, theirreverenttherapist.com. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.